Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into the life of, well, an icon, really. Amelia Earhart.
Definitely iconic.
Hmm.
And I think, we have some lecture excerpts here that'll give us kind of a fresh perspective.
I think so, too. I mean, Amelia's story, it's more than just like, oh, she was a pilot.
It's about so much more. It's about, challenging what people thought women could do and speaking up for inclusivity. Way back when it was harder.
Right, like way harder. And she was like fearless from the get-go. I was reading that her first time seeing a plane, she wasn't even impressed.
Yeah, at a state fair. Right. Not exactly like love at first flight.
No, not at all. But I think it says a lot about her. Like in the early 1900s, there were all these expectations for girls, and she was like, nope, not for me.
Yeah, totally. Like breaking the mold from the start. But then there's that biplane ride. Open cockpit. The
Yeah.
wind, the freedom.
That's the turning point, right?
Definitely. It's like that's when the spark happened. And it takes her from being a nurse's aide in World War I to like smashing an altitude record in her own plane.
The Canary. What a great name for a plane, by the way.
It really does kind of foreshadow, all the amazing stuff she'd go on to do.
Speaking of amazing stuff, most people know about the transatlantic flight, but here's a fun fact. Amelia wasn't the one flying it, at least not at first.
Right. The first time across, she was a passenger.
A passenger.
And I think that actually like fueled her fire even more. Like, okay, now I'm going to do it solo. Only one person had done that before her, Charles Lindbergh. So, yeah, the pressure was definitely on.
Can you imagine? 1932, she takes off in this Lockheed Vega 5B. A decent plane, but nothing like what we have now.
Right. Like no GPS, no autopilot, nothing. I mean, she's navigating with like a compass, some maps, and literally the stars over the ocean. Like that blows my mind.
And then you've got the weather, right? I was reading about ice building up on the wings, the altimeter acting up, and crazy winds.
15 hours in the air, battling all of that. Talk about resilience.
And she lands in a pasture in Northern Ireland. There's this story about a farmer who comes up to her and just says, "Have you now?"
Classic. Like, he had no idea the magnitude of what just happened.
Right. But the world did. I mean, that flight, it wasn't just about Amelia. It was like she broke this huge barrier for women in aviation.
It showed everyone, what women were capable of.
Hmm.
It's a message that still, I think, really matters today, especially for women in, like, STEM fields.
And even beyond that, right? Like, it's about not letting anyone tell you what you can't do.
Exactly. And she even wrote about it. I was reading her stuff in Cosmopolitan, and she said, women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. Pretty powerful.
Yeah, powerful stuff. And she gets the Distinguished Flying Cross for that flight, the first woman ever to receive it.
A huge honor.
Yeah.
But her impact, it goes way beyond any awards.
So true. And then there's the other side of the coin, the fame and, well, the scrutiny that came with it.
Yeah, the scrutiny, I mean, was it amplified because she was a woman? Was her husband, George Putnam, I mean, he was her publicist too. Was he playing up her image?
It's kind of a debate that's still going on.
Right. Like, was she as skilled as the male pilots? Or was it all hype? It's complicated.
For sure. But it's important to, think about all those different perspectives.
Yeah. But, a lot of historians, they still see her as this amazing pilot. She planned her flights really carefully, and when things got tough, her skills really came through.
It seems like she was always pushing boundaries, whether it was, in the air or in how society viewed women.
Totally. And she didn't just want to break records. She wanted more women involved in aviation.
Like really involved, right?
Really involved. Besides the writing she did, she helped start this organization called the 99s. It's for female pilots, and it's still going strong today. I mean, that's legacy right there.
Wow, she was really building a community. But, of course, we can't talk about Amelia without talking about her disappearance.
Yeah, in 1937, she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, they just vanish over the Pacific.
In all those theories, it's almost like the mystery is part of her story now.
The crash, the espionage angle, the whole surviving on an island idea keeps people guessing.
It really does. But you know what? I think before we get too deep into all that, it's important to remember what we do know about Amelia. Like, her skills as a pilot.
Right.
Think about navigation back then. No GPS. She's using dead reckoning, which is basically like, calculations and estimates and celestial navigation using the stars and like serious math to figure out where she was.
That's intense.
And we mentioned the icy wings before. Well, her plane, it didn't even have like proper de-icing equipment.
She was flying in conditions that are like Hard to imagine now.
But beyond the flying, she was also a really good public speaker. She used that platform to talk about aviation, to empower women. She had the saying, the most effective way to do it is to do it.
She definitely lived by that, didn't she? It wasn't just talk, it was action.
So we've got this adventurous spirit, we've got these groundbreaking flights, we've got this advocacy work. She was, complex.
Definitely complex. And her legacy, well, it's not simple either.
How so?
Well, her success, it was a combination of things. Her talent, obviously, but also her drive, the fact that aviation was booming at the time, and even, George Putnam and his, media skills.
So it's more than just like Amelia single-handedly changed the world.
Right. It's more layered. But what's clear is that her courage, her belief in breaking barriers, and her unwavering support for women, those were real.
And they still matter.
Absolutely. Amelia Earhart reminds us that pushing boundaries, fighting for inclusivity, that can lead to incredible change. It's a story that makes you want to, dream bigger and not let anything hold you back.
And sometimes those dreams, they seem impossible.
Yeah, but she shows us, what happens when you chase them anyway? And we're just getting started. There's so much more to uncover. I keep thinking about Amelia and George Putnam, their partnership. It really helped her career, but it also, I think, added to all the controversy around her.
Right. Like in part one, we were talking about how her legacy is kind of complicated. It's like she was living in two worlds almost.
Exactly. The world of, aviation, where she was proving herself, pushing limits, and then the world of, celebrity, where her image was being shaped for the public.
It makes you wonder, how did Amelia feel about all that?
That's the thing, right? We only get glimpses. But from her writing, her interviews, you see this woman who was so dedicated to flying. She wanted real achievement, more women in aviation. Not just the fame. It's easy to get lost in all the publicity and stuff. But at heart, she was a pilot, an adventurer, and a real advocate.
Those parts of her, they come through in everything she did. But I think it's also natural to get pulled back into the mystery. Her disappearance, it's unsolved.
Right. And all those theories, they just keep swirling around.
We were talking about a few, the crash, the espionage angle, even the idea that she survived somehow on an island.
It's the unknown, right? It keeps us hooked.
I think the mystery almost makes her story even bigger, in a way.
Yeah. But we got to be careful, too. For her family, not knowing, that had to be incredibly tough.
Absolutely. Beyond all the facts and theories, there's a real human story there, with ambition, courage, and, tragedy.
It's a story that still, pulls us in all these years later. As we keep digging into it, what's standing out to you? What are we learning?
I'm struck by just her determination. She had a goal, and she went after it with everything, all those challenges, and she never gave up.
That's so important, especially now when it's easy to, get discouraged. Amelia reminds us to keep going.
And to push boundaries, right. She didn't care about what society expected. She made her own way.
Exactly. She showed that women could do anything, even in a man's world back then. And she didn't stop there. She used her voice to lift other women up, to make space for them.
Her impact goes way beyond her own accomplishments. It's she opened the door for so many female pilots and just inspired people, to follow their passion no matter what.
Her legacy is all about courage, pushing for equality, and believing in what's possible. It's something we can all connect with today. But before we wrap up, remember that question we asked earlier. If Amelia were here now, what barriers do you think she'd be fighting?
That's a good one. It makes you think about, the world we're creating now and what kind of legacy we're leaving.
Yeah. What if gender wasn't a barrier anymore? What dream would you go for if you knew you couldn't fail?
Wow. Amelia's story, it shows us that we should dream big, and go after those dreams with, that same fearlessness, even if they seem impossible.
That's it, because pushing those boundaries, that's how we find out what we can really do. Even if it's taking small steps at first.
Right. It could be joining a group that shares your values, speaking out against injustice, or just supporting the women in your life.
Every little thing adds up, Change takes time, but we got to do it together.
Well said. So, as we kind of finish up this part of our look at Amelia Earhart, what's the main takeaway? What do you hope our listener is thinking about?
I want them to remember that one person can make a huge difference. That pushing for change, for a more inclusive world, it matters. It's a story that makes you want to dream big, challenge what's expected, and never stop exploring. But there's one last piece of her story we haven't touched on yet, and it might just be the most important part of all.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What is it we haven't talked about yet?
We focused a lot on her, courage, her breaking all those records. But there's this other side to Amelia. I think it says a lot about who she was, deep down.
Okay.
Her compassion, her wanting to help others.
I know she was passionate about, getting more women into aviation, but compassion.
So when she was a social worker in Boston, she was like all in, helping immigrants, families who were struggling. It wasn't enough for her to just, fly above it all. She wanted to make things better right here on the ground.
I didn't know that about her, working with those families. It shows like another dimension to her.
Right. And it reminds us, we can all make a difference. We don't have to be setting records or, breaking down barriers in like big ways.
Yeah, sometimes it's the smaller things that matter most. Being kind, helping people.
Totally. And there's this quote from Amelia that I think sums it up perfectly. She said, "Use your fear. It can take you to the place where you store your courage." I think that's true for like so much more than just flying.
Whoa, it makes you think, right? Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about like doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid.
Especially when it's about helping someone, making things right.
I think Amelia's whole story shows us that. Her impact, it went way beyond her own success. She inspired people with her actions, her words, her belief in what we're all capable of.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Amelia Earhart's life, what do you hope our listeners take away from it?
I hope they're inspired, not just by what she did, but by, her kindness, her desire to make the world a better place.
Me too. It's a story that tells us dream big, challenge the rules, and keep pushing forward.
And maybe, most importantly, it shows us that real courage, a good heart, those are just as important as, ambition and a love for adventure.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep working to make the world a better place.
And remember, you have the power to do amazing things. Don't ever forget that.